Hello, friends, and welcome. We are going to look a little bit closer at this verse in Matthew, or I should say these verses from Matthew 24, when Jesus says, "As in the days of Noah, so shall the coming of man be. For they were eating and drinking, marrying, giving in marriage." And so to look at it, it would seem that this is a relatively peaceful and abundant time. But was that really the case? Many of you watch Israeli News Live, that channel with Stephen Banoun, and he has talked about the days of Noah, how they weren't great days, talking about cannibalism. And I've kind of like been, I don't know if I agree with that. But in order to know, we've got to do that research for ourselves. So this is what we're going to attempt, just so we can get a better understanding of the timeline of the tribulation. I said in my last video, I've said in previous videos, we have just witnessed the opening of the fifth seal. So just like with the previous seals, it wasn't, a, a big ordeal, and yet, it was the Supreme Court hearing the case of this mandate that will require people to either take the tests or the injection. And we already know there's not enough tests. This is just going to flop, and many people will lose their jobs if they choose to remain uninjected. All right. So before I get too far ahead of myself, I'm going to do what our custom is and just open the Bible. Lord, please show us marvelous and amazing things about what you are doing today. And he's taken me to Jeremiah. I don't have anything underlined. This is chapter 51. This is what the Lord says. See, I will stir up the spirit of a destroyer against Babylon and the people of Leb-Kamai. I will send foreigners to Babylon to winnow her and to devastate her land. They will oppose her on every side in the day of her disaster. Let not the archer string his bow, nor let him put on his armor. Do not spare her young men. Completely destroy her army. They will fall down slain in Babylon, fatally wounded in the streets. For Israel and Judah have not been forsaken by their God, the Lord Almighty, though their land is full of guilt before the Holy One of Israel. Flee from Babylon, run for your lives. Do not be destroyed because of her sins. It is time for the Lord's vengeance. He will pay her what she deserves. Pray over these words. Okay. Again, that was the beginning of Jeremiah 51. I mean, we're at that point. We're at that point, friends. So today, moving on from there, I feel like I should pray now. I feel like I should cry now. But we've got to look at these things. So when I started my research with the book, or the life of Noah, I went to the book of Jubilees. I just did a Google search trying to figure out where to look. And there may be other sources. These books, yes, they are from the Apocrypha, but they were also found, many of them, in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And definitely worth looking at, considering, praying over. Because what I'm seeing, and I think that you will witness as well, is that they give a very good description, consistent description with what we see in the Bible, in accordance with God's will, his heart, and what likely happened in history. So Jubilee chapter 5, verse 1, and it came to pass, Lord, please bless the hearing of your word, when the children of men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the angels of God saw them on a certain year of this Jubilee, that they were beautiful to look upon. And they took themselves wives of all whom they chose, and they bore unto them sons, and they were giants. And lawlessness increased on the earth, and all flesh corrupted its way, alike men and cattle and beasts and birds and everything that walks on the earth. All of them corrupted their ways and their orders. They began to devour each other, and lawlessness increased on the earth, and every imagination of the thoughts of all men was thus evil continually. Okay, so we've already captured a glimpse of cannibalism just in the 5th chapter. This is very early in man's history. Let's go ahead and continue. Verse 3, and God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, and all flesh had corrupted its orders. And all that were upon the earth had wrought all manner of evil before his eyes. And he said that he would destroy man and all flesh upon the face of the earth, which he had created. But Noah found grace before the eyes of the Lord. And against the angels whom he had sent upon the earth, he was exceedingly wroth. And he gave commandment to root them out of all their dominion. And he bade us to bind them in the depths of the earth. And behold, they are bound in the midst of them and are kept separate. Okay, and now we're going to really get into the meat of what is happening. And against, verse 7, their sons went forth a command from before his face, that they should be smitten with the sword and be removed from under heaven. And he said, my spirit shall not always abide on man, for they are also flesh, and their days shall be 120 years. And he sent his sword into their midst, that each should slay his neighbor. And they began to slay each other, till they all fell by the sword, and were destroyed from the earth. And their fathers were witnesses of their destruction. Now, I think most of us have heard the story of the fall of the giants, the titans. But it's just interesting to note that there was the sword brought into the picture here with the judgments even before the flood. Okay, so we could kind of look at this as what we see with the red horseman. There's going to be disruption here. That's not the only way to interpret the red horseman, but definitely physical wielding of weapons, of the sword, is part of that. So that was happening in the days of Noah. So we can't say, oh, it was all hunky-dory. There was a lot of corruption going on there. Now, let's also take a look at the book of Jasher. Now, what I kind of wanted to do, and this is going to back up just a little bit more. Maybe I should have done the Jubilee second. But I wanted to look at the famine. Okay. We don't really read in the Bible that, they allow us to have, I guess you can say, the King James allowed us to have. We don't really see a lot in regards to famine during the time of Noah. But let's see what the book of Jasher says. Let me get it queued up for you. 1 second. So in order to understand how we got to that point where man had just fallen into corruption, we need to look at the family tree, some history, so we can have some context. We've got Adam and Eve here with this graphic, supposedly from the 18th century. I just did a random Google search, and this is probably the clearest illustration of what I found. And when I say illustration, I don't mean like literal visual, but just very simplified in terms of being straightforward about showing the descendants, the family tree. So we've got Cain over here. His line was wiped out with the flood, for the most part. when we look over to, Abel was killed by Cain, and then we've got the third son that's mentioned, Seth. There were likely other sons and daughters. They married their sisters, their cousins, uncles, nieces, nephews, whatever. So we've got a few generations. Now, just to clarify, Cain did have a son. I believe his name is spelled as Enosh. In our Bible, there are some translations that say Enoch. This is a different person. The Enoch that we are looking at was descended from Seth. He is also was also the father of Methuselah, who was the father of Lamech. If you look at some more, of the history in the book of Jasher, you'll see that Lamech actually killed Cain. It wasn't intentional. I think it was like a hunting accident. But that is how that happened. Actually, he killed both Cain and his, great, 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 great grandson, Tubal Cain, who was kind of weak anyway. And then after Lamech, we see Noah and his three sons. So when we look at Enoch, I mean, he was 65 years old when he had his son Methuselah, which was kind of young for that time. But then he kind of just, wandered off from mankind and secluded himself in his chambers, seeking the instruction of the Lord in knowledge and understanding. And he wisely retired from the sons of man and secreted himself from them many days. This is Jasher chapter 3, verse 3. And it was at the expiration of many years, whilst he was serving the Lord and praying before him in his house, that an angel of the Lord called to him from heaven, and he said, Here I am. And he said, Rise, go forth from thy house and from the place where thou dost hide thyself, and appear to the sons of men, in order that thou mayest teach them the way in which they should go, and the work which they must accomplish to enter in the ways of God. So up until this time, Adam had been leading the people. And yes, he was still alive. In fact, the chapter goes on to record how Enoch and his son Methuselah buried Adam when he died. People, for the most part, were pretty righteous at this time. And Enoch began to rule, and the kings of the earth sought Enoch out. They wanted that wisdom. They wanted that instruction. And everything was good. And maybe that's why God took Enoch away, was to test man. Because we're going to see that even though Methuselah loved the Lord, followed God, things went downhill. Let me get you queued up. One moment. All right, so we're going to read a little bit about Enoch's exit and the level of devotion that the men, most of the people of the earth, had toward him. Verse 32 of chapter 3 of the book of Jasher. And it was after this that he rose up and rose upon the horse, and he went forth, and all the sons of men went after him, about 800,000 men, and they went with him one day's journey. So what had happened was there was a horse that just appeared from heaven. Enoch didn't see it, but the people who were listening did see it, and they told him. And so he shared with them that this horse was meant to take him into heaven, and they weren't having it. They were not having it. Verse 33, and the second day he said to them, Return home to your tents. Why will you go? Perhaps you may die. And some of them went from him, and those that remained went with him 6 days' journey. And Enoch said to them every day, Return to your tents, lest you may die. But they were not willing to return, and they went with him. And on the 6th day, some of the men remained and clung to him. And they said to him, We will go with thee, to the place where thou goest. As the Lord liveth, death only shall separate us. They urged so much to go with him that he ceased speaking to them. And they went after him and would not return. And when the kings returned, they caused a census to be taken in order to know the number of remaining men that went with Enoch. And it was upon the seventh day that Enoch ascended into heaven in a whirlwind with horses and chariots of fire. And on the eighth day, all the kings that had been with Enoch sent to bring back the number of men that were with Enoch in that place from which he ascended into heaven. And all those kings went to the place, and they found the earth there filled with snow, and upon the snow were large stones of snow. And one said to the other, Come, let us break through the snow and see. Perhaps the men that remained with Enoch are dead, and are now under the stones of snow. And they searched, but could not find him, for he had ascended into heaven. So that is a little more detail into the story of Enoch. And just the devotion of those who lived at that time. Now, keep that number 800,000 in your mind, because we're going to see a similar number as in the days of Noah when the ark was about to close, for different reasons. That number showed up there for different reasons. All right, one moment. All right, we're going to jump into chapter 4 of the book of Jasher. Just FYI, Jasher was not a person. When we look at the meaning of Jasher, it means book of the upright, or book of the just man. I think I mistakenly said the enlightened one, but book of the upright. All right, so jumping back to the book of Jasher, chapter 4, verse 1. And all the days that Enoch lived upon the earth were 365 years. And when Enoch had ascended into heaven, all the kings of the earth rose and took Methuselah his son and anointed him. And they caused him to reign over them in the place of his father. Jumping down to verse 3, and Methuselah acted uprightly in the sight of God as his father Enoch had taught him. And he likewise, during the whole of his life, taught the sons of men wisdom, knowledge, and the fear of God. And he did not turn from the good way either to the right or to the left. But in the latter days of Methuselah, the sons of men turned from the Lord. They corrupted the earth. They robbed and plundered each other, and they rebelled against God, and they transgressed, and they corrupted their ways, and would not hearken to the voice of Methuselah, but rebelled against him. And the Lord was exceedingly wroth against them, and the Lord continued to destroy the seed in those days, so that there was neither sowing nor reaping on the earth. For when they sowed the ground in order that they might obtain food for their support, behold, thorns and thistles were produced, which they did not sow. And still the sons of men did not turn from their evil ways, and their hands were still extended to do evil in the sight of God. And they provoked the Lord with their evil ways. And the Lord was very wroth and repented that he had made them. And he thought to destroy and annihilate them. And he did so. In those days, when Lamech, the son of Methuselah, was 160 years old, Seth, the son of Adam, died. And all the days that Seth lived were 912 years, and he died. All right, So we're seeing, jumping down to verse 12, and at that time the sons of men sowed the ground, and a little food was produced. Yet the sons of men did not turn from their evil ways, and they trespassed and rebelled against God. And the wife of Lamech conceived and bare him a son at that time, at the revolution of the year. And Methuselah called his name Noah, saying, the earth was in his days at rest and free from corruption. And Lamech his father called his name Menachem, saying, this one shall comfort us in our works and miserable toil in the earth, which God has cursed. And the child grew up and was weaned and went in the way of his father Methuselah, perfect and upright with God. And all the sons of men departed from the ways of the Lord in those days, as they multiplied upon the face of the earth with sons and daughters, and they taught one another their evil practices, and they continued sinning against the Lord. And every man made unto himself a god, and they robbed and plundered every man his neighbor, as well as his relative, and they corrupted the earth, and the earth was filled with violence. So it just gets worse and worse. Methuselah loved the Lord, was a great leader, but not to the extent that Enoch. I mean, Enoch just reflected God because he spent so much time with him. So what did Jesus mean when he said, as in the days of Noah, people were eating and drinking? Well, obviously, it's likely very similar to what Stephen Ben-Nun says in his teachings, that they had, in fact, engaged in cannibalism. Now, in considering, all these things, I've had to look at the timeline that I've put up and ask myself, okay, if there really is a pre-tribulation rapture, why hasn't it happened? Because we're seeing the seals open, and I firmly believe that we have just seen seal number 5 open, and you can look at our previous video to get more details into that. As I said earlier in this video, the Supreme Court is reviewing a mandate that will basically put a lot of people out of work, and there's going to be price gouging because there aren't enough tests. And even if there are, what about processing times? I mean, there's a lot of roadblocks when it comes to for people to continue working who have not been injected. And that's just in the United States. There are countries all over the world that are experiencing worse fates. There are protests, there's uprisings, there's severe weather. I mean, we are definitely in the time of sorrows that Jesus referred to when he talks of wars, rumors of wars, famines, pestilence. All of these things must happen, but the end is not yet come. But at that time, after let's look at it directly. Chapter 24, Matthew, verse 4, take heed that no man deceive you. Jesus answered them, for many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in diverse places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. So we can definitely pick out the first 3 horsemen in this one verse. We've got the pestilence of the first horseman conquering and to conquer. I think we can all agree the world's pretty much been conquered with this new world system, this new world governance, coming into the new world order. We've got the pestilence, we've got wars, a nation rising against nation with the second horseman, the famines, food shortages with the third horseman, and then earthquakes, just as a matter of course. That's really the 6th seal, but these are things that are happening now, not to the extent that perhaps we expected. So many people are in denial that we are in the tribulation now, and okay, But we've got to look at verse 9. Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and ye shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. And then shall many be offended, and shall betray one another, and shall hate one another. Okay, that's the fifth seal right there. And if that's the criteria that people need for the tribulation to start, okay, so be it. At the same time, does that mean that there's no pre-trib rapture? I mean, these are things that we're considering. By God's grace, these seals have not, opened and just caused the amount of devastation that I think many of us expected. For instance, with the opening of the first seal, we see, let me jump over to that. We see the white horseman, the white planet, the king planet, Jupiter. We see the living creature with the face of an eagle, and we see the tools, you will, that the white horseman is given, the bow and the crown. Another word for crown is corona in Spanish, and then the bow and arrow can be, seen as the toxin that is being injected into our bodies in accordance with the one world order. And just because I've got it pulled up here, and you guys know I'm a stickler for really interpreting and sharing the word of God, here is if you want to pause and take a look at the verbiage, I invite you to do that. This is Revelation chapter 6 that I've got up here right now. Okay, and then jumping back to Matthew 24, the next verse, verse 11, and many false prophets shall rise and deceive many. So we've got a very interesting statement with the beginning and ending of this segment of scriptures being, don't be deceived, verse 4, and then again, don't be deceived by the false prophets. Now, the reason I think that is because when we go to Revelation 12, we've all, heard what the Revelation 12 sign is. That's verses 1 and 2. There's many, how many verses are in Revelation 12? There's 15 verses after that. When we look at verse 3, this has been a stickler for most of us. And there appeared another wonder in heaven. And behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his head. And his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven and did cast them to the earth. All right, and I'm going to stop right there. So why haven't we seen this? Well, this is Revelation at its best. I've got Revelation 12 pulled up in the Greek, and we've got the word stars here. I'm going to click on it, and yes, the usage, it is for a star. Kind of looks like the word asteroid, but, a star, something that you will see in space. And when you look at the uses of it, it's pretty literal. In Matthew and Mark, 1 Corinthians, they're talking about literal stars. Jude starts to get a little cryptic, however, wandering stars. Of themselves shames, stars wandering. Well, are we getting into a spiritual realm here? But then we definitely see that when we jump to Revelation 1, when we see Jesus defining the 7 stars as the 7 angels. Okay, so we've got a little bit of double meaning here. And that was Revelation 1:20. Let's see if it lets me pull on that. The mystery of the 7 stars, which you saw on the right hand of me, and the 7 lampstands, golden, the 7 stars, angels of the 7 churches are. And the lampstands, 7 churches are. Okay, so that's the literal translation from Greek. So we're seeing that, okay, we're getting cryptic at this point in Revelation, because as we also saw in Revelation chapter 4, we can pull that graphic up as well. So we see here with stellarium in May, we have an Antichrist comet here. It could be representative of Barack Obama. A lot of people are getting that word. If that's the case, this comet will be going right through the hooves of the first horseman, in essence. The archer wasn't always a centaur. It once was just a man on a horse in the Hebrew Mazzaroth. It's going to go through those hooves before hitting the crown of Sagittarius right next to it. It's more of a Greek, ivy diadem sort of crown. But this could symbolize the Antichrist getting the mortal head wound and then being crowned. At the time that this event happens, we're going to take a look and see where the sun is. Well, the sun is right next to Uranus. And if we look at our timetable over here, Uranus is associated with the seventh seal. Can move this over a little bit. So we're looking at, in fact, I'm even going to move this. I'm looking at, by a literal translation of Matthew 24 plus 2 Thessalonians 2, which says that the man of lawlessness has to be revealed before the coming of the Son of Man, that we could be looking around the May timeframe. Doesn't mean that we're not going to have darkness here with the sixth seal, but for there to be, just looking at what I'm seeing in the heavens, that could be something significant. Now, what I also want to do, we see that around this time frame, as the sun approaches Uranus, we've got the false prophet comet. And I've lost my mouse. There it is. So with the seventh seal opening, the head wound by the Antichrist, and the rise of the false prophet, all at the beginning of May. And again, this may not be, a huge commotion. We've got to keep praying. I am praying so hard against those mandates at this moment. I really, really am. It's going to require a lot of prayer. We can't get lazy on that, thinking, oh, the tribulation hasn't started. It has. It started. So be prepared. Be prepared to be handed over. We can't just say, oh, as in the days of Noah, they were eating and drinking, so everything's going to be fine. The days of Noah, now we see for ourselves, they weren't great. They were engaging in cannibalism. There was judgment by God. Actually, let's go over and finish up, because I told you to remember that number 800,000. Okay, looking at the book of Jasher, chapter 6, verse 1. At that time, after the death of Methuselah, the Lord said to Noah, go thou with thy household into the ark. Behold, I will gather to thee all the wild animals of the earth, the beasts of the field, and the fowls of the air, and they shall all come and surround the ark. And thou shalt go and seat thyself by the doors of the ark, and all the beasts, the animals, and the fowls shall assemble and place themselves before thee. And such of them as shall come and crouch before thee shalt thou take and deliver into the hands of thy sons, who shall bring them to the ark. And all that stand before thee shalt thou leave. And the Lord brought this about on the next day. And animals, beasts, and fowls came in great multitudes and surrounded the ark. And Noah went and seated himself by the door of the ark. And of all flesh that crouched before him, he brought into the ark. And all that stood before him, he left upon earth. And the lioness came with her 2 whelps, male and female, and the 3 crouched before Noah. And the 2 whelps rose up against the lioness and smote her, and made her flee from her place. And she went away, and they returned to their places and crouched upon the earth before Noah. And the lioness ran away and stood in the place of the lions. And Noah saw this and wondered greatly. And he rose and took the 2 whelps and brought them into the ark. And Noah brought into the ark from all living creatures that were upon earth, so that there was none left but which Noah brought into the ark. 2 and 2 came to Noah into the ark, but from the clean animals and clean fowls he brought 7 couples, as God had commanded him. And all the animals and beasts and fowls were still there, and they surrounded the ark at every place. And the rain had not descended till 7 days after. And on that day the Lord caused the whole earth to shake, and the sun darkened, and the fountains of the world raged, and the whole earth was moved violently, and the lightning flashed, and the thunder roared, and all the fountains in the earth were broken up, such as was not known to the inhabitants before. And God did this mighty act in order to terrify the sons of men, that there might be no more evil upon earth. And still the sons of men would not return from their evil ways, and they increased the anger of the Lord at that time, and did not even direct their hearts to all this. And at the end of 7 days, in the 600th year of the life of Noah, the waters of the flood were upon the earth, and all the fountains of the deep were broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened, and the rain was the rain was upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. And Noah and his household and all the living creatures that were with him came into the ark on account of the watchers of the flood, and the Lord shut him in. And all the sons of men that were left upon the earth became exhausted through evil on account of the rain, for the waters were coming more violently upon the earth, and the animals and beasts were still surrounding the ark. And the sons of men assembled together, about 700,000 men and women, and they came unto Noah to the ark. And they called to Noah, saying, Open for us, that we may come to thee in the ark. And wherefore shall we die? And Noah with a loud voice answered them from the ark, saying, Have you not all rebelled against the Lord, and said that he does not exist? And therefore the Lord brought upon you this evil, to destroy and cut you off from the face of the earth. Is not this the thing that I spoke to you of 120 years back? And you would not hearken to the voice of the Lord. And now do you desire to live upon the earth? And they said to Noah, We are ready to return to the Lord. Only open for us, that we may live and not die. And Noah answered them, saying, Behold, now that you see the trouble of your souls, you wish to return to the Lord. Why did you not return during these 120 years which the Lord granted you as the determined period? But now you come and tell me this on account of the troubles of your souls. Now also the Lord will not listen to you, neither will he give ear to you on this day, so that you will not now succeed in your wishes. And the sons of men approached in order to break into the ark, to come in on account of the rain, for they could not bear the rain upon them. And the Lord sent all the beasts and animals that stood round the ark, and the beasts overpowered them and drove them from that place. And every man went his way, and they again scattered themselves from the face of the earth. And the rain was still descending upon the earth, and it descended 40 days and 40 nights. And the waters prevailed greatly upon the earth, and all flesh that was upon the earth or in the deep waters died, whether men, animal, beasts, creeping things, or birds of the air. And there only remained Noah and those that were with him in the ark. And the waters prevailed, and they greatly increased upon the earth. And they lifted up the ark, and it was raised from the earth. And the ark floated upon the face of the waters, and it was tossed upon the waters, so that all the living creatures within were turned about like pottage in a cauldron. And great anxiety seized all the living creatures that were in the ark, and the ark was like to be broken. And all the living creatures that were in the ark were terrified, and the lions roared, and the oxen lowed, and the wolves howled, and every living creature in the ark spoke and lamented in its own language, so that their voices reached to a great distance. And Noah and his sons cried and wept in their troubles. They were greatly afraid that they had reached the gates of death. And Noah prayed unto the Lord and cried unto him on account of this. And he said, O Lord, help us, for we have no strength to bear this evil that has encompassed us. For the waves of the water have surrounded us. Mischievous torrents have terrified us. The snares of death have come before us. Answer us, O Lord, answer us. Light up thy countenance toward us, and be gracious to us. Redeem us and deliver us. And the Lord hearkened to the voice of Noah, and the Lord remembered him. And a wind passed over the earth, and the waters were still, and the ark rested. And the fountains of the deep and the windows of heaven were stopped, and the rain from the heaven was restrained. All right, so I think we know the rest of the story of Noah, but in a way, now you know the rest of the story, as Paul Harvey would say. Lord, please show us amazing things in your word. Take into the book of Luke, chapter 16, starting with verse 9. I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourself, so that when it is gone, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings. Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. So if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? And if you have not been trustworthy with someone else's property, who will give you property of your own? All right. A little bit of a juxtaposition from what we opened with and what we studied, but definitely wise words in these end times. Use what you have, even worldly possessions, be it bartering, be it just aiding and assisting, to get you through these hard times. Keep preparing, keep storing up. Lord, thank you so much for your word and clarification into what the days of Noah looked like and what we can expect going forward. Make us strong. Make us strong just as you are, Lord Jesus, and help us to keep turning to you, putting our faith in you. In Jesus' name I pray, amen and amen.